This is Cruelty Crossing, my team's entry to the Big Mode Game Jam. The jam started a couple weeks ago and it lasted 9 days. For some context, it had been a bit since the last game jam me and my friends did where we won big. We got put on the front page of a big website and the game now has over 130,000 plays, which is really cool. Also spent 8 months and they still haven't sent us our prize money, which is kind of weird, but whatever. So anyways, we saw this game jam hosted by Donkey and we thought it looked cool, so we decided to do it. This is actually the second Big Mode game jam we've participated in. The first one was a year ago where we submitted a game called Sector V. I think our last game turned out really cool in the end, but the state that it was in when we submitted it was pretty bad. There were balance issues, bugs, and general playability problems, which meant we didn't get very high in the ratings. It was only after I went back and fixed everything after the jam ended that it ended up being really cool, in my opinion. The main problem we had with Sector V was that we overscoped. The plans we had made for the game far exceeded what we could realistically make in 9 days, and resulted in us being super rushed. Making that game honestly might have been one of the most stressful and intense experiences I've ever had in game development. I'll make a video or something about it at some time probably because it was pretty interesting. Definitely a big learning experience. So this time around, we decided to go with the same strategy as we did with our previous game jam. Instead of scoping big and trying to make something really crazy, we instead just took it chill and tried to make something simple and entertaining. Like last time, we focused more on comedic and short-term entertainment value rather than making something super hardcore and technically impressive. Basically, we just took it less seriously. This time we also had something that we didn't have last time, a second programmer. In all our previous jams, I was the sole programmer, which is fine and all, but can end up putting a lot of pressure on one person. Having our friend Holy Muffin help me out this time with the coding was a huge relief and allowed us to split up all the tasks and work a lot more efficiently. So anyway, here's how development went. So it's the first day of the jam, the theme is revealed to be slick. Slick could mean literally slippery, or it could just mean a cool or interesting mechanic in a game, I guess. Me and Dead Rat Dev were busy most of the day that day. We actually went out to see Iron Lung in theaters. Would recommend, by the way, it's really good. And we tried to come up with ideas while we were out. For some reason, we had this ongoing joke that whatever we would do would be based around olive oil, because for some reason that was the first thing he could think of that was slippery. We had a couple ideas that were more of jokes, like Olive Oil Man, which is just gonna be like Pepsi Man, but instead of being a guy running down the street, he would instead be a guy who's completely covered head to toe with olive oil, and you'd be sliding uncontrollably downhill where you'd have to avoid obstacles. There was one where you get beat up outside of a Bojangles, except you're covered in olive oil, which is honestly a fire idea, and I'm still considering making that at some point. There was one where you have to do open heart surgery on someone, except you're covered in olive oil. There was also one where you had to rob a bank, but you're covered in olive oil. Most of them were just do X thing, except you're covered in olive oil. We also thought it'd be funny to just make Iron Lung, and it's just the same game, except instead of an ocean of blood, it's an ocean of olive oil. It was really stupid. We didn't have any real ideas pretty much all day. So next day comes around and everyone's asking us what to do, like what the plan was and the timeline and stuff, and we had literally nothing. So that evening we hopped on a call and planned everything out. We ended up coming up with 2 or 3 legitimate ideas. One of them was where you're a piece of butter on a pan, and they're like sponges flying at you, and you have to skid around the pan and avoid them. But that idea felt pretty lame and like we could do something better, so we got rid of it pretty quick. There were 2 other ideas that we were stuck between. One of them was going to be called Butter Knight, and it was basically a platformer where you're a knight with a stick of butter for a sword, and you can use the butter as a skateboard as well. So like there would be slopes and ramps that you could skate on and build momentum, and enemies you could fight with your butter sword. But the catch is as you use the butter more, it would slowly disappear, so you've got to finish the level before you run out. The other idea, it was where you're a menace to society, and you have this road where people are just walking across, minding their own business, and you have to place items in front of them and make them slip. The initial idea was for this to be some kind of tile-based puzzle game where people would have different movement patterns, and you would plan where all the items go and try to take out as many people as possible with them. But after thinking it over for a bit, we decided that it was probably going to be too complicated to do in 8 days, so we're sort of leaning towards Butter Knight. Eventually though, we decided it would be better to simplify the idea and just have a game where you can run around freely and place items in front of people in real time. We decided it would be more of a stealth game where you'd have to take people out without getting detected. In the end, we decided to do this idea because it was more unique and less serious. And also because I just felt like doing a platformer would be too simple. It was also kind of cool because the idea has like a double meaning, because you have to be slick to avoid detection, but you also have to make people slip on slick things, so yeah. So anyway, it was the 3rd day of the jam now, and we had pretty much already wasted 2 days by this point, so I was like, I've got to start getting stuff done now or it's going to be Jover. I started by making the basic player character and making the camera system. The next day, I focused on adding items. You can pick them up and place them down, which is pretty cool, and the next day, I added the ability to throw them. So this is more of like a template for all the specific items that we're going to add later. The first 3 days, I was taking it pretty easy. I just finished a mini project where basically all I did for 7 days was work on it and like nothing else, so I needed a bit of a break. The next day, I worked on on the homeless guy. He gives you items that you can use to mess people up. I also added the credits room. Although after I added it, I realized there was actually a problem where it would stutter when it tried to show my profile picture, because I guess it was too high resolution, which is kind of funny. So I had to fix that later. While I was doing all that, Muffin was working on the NPCs and their AI. A couple days later, we'd gotten a lot more done on the behaviors and stuff with some of the guys, and I added a bush and a settings menu. The next day comes around, and by this point, we only had about 3 days left. I added a few items, including the banana, the bucket, which blinds people, and the firework, which is basically just the firework from Goat Simulator. I also added a penny, which distracts people and makes them wander over to it to pick it up, kind of like Hitman. The next day, I added a bunch more items. Not going to say what they are because I don't want to spoil everything, and finished the gameplay room. I also added this billboard that tracks your score, so that's cool. We decided that there wasn't going to be a way to lose the game, and that it would just be focused on getting the highest score you can. So I also added a timer in the top left that ends the game when it runs out. So it was now the final day of the jam. As usual, this ended up being the most intense day. I actually ended up working on it for 15 hours just in that one day. There's only a few hours left, and there was a lot to do. One of the big things I knew I needed to do was make the game run on web. Having your game playable without needing to download it is actually extremely important in game jams. And if you don't have a web version, it significantly decreases the amount of people who are going to play your game. It's a really huge deal, I'm telling you. Porting things to HTML though, especially in GameMaker, which is the engine I use, can be a huge pain sometimes. There are a lot of things that work fine on Windows and every other platform that will randomly cause your game to crash in the browser. One of the previous game jams I did, where we made a game called Darkness and Duckies, I remember spending a long time just trying to get it to work in web, and it was a huge pain. And in the end, it didn't even work that well, and I had a bunch of problems anyway. So I was pretty nervous going into this that I would have similar problems, but despite it crashing a bunch at first and not working, I was eventually able to fix everything, and it runs on web now, which is pretty cool. Turns out the problem was this function which sets the game's refresh rate. Just crashes on HTML for some reason. I don't know. Maybe that'll help someone. Then we added the music that our friend Sam made, as well as sound effects. Me and Muffin worked on stuff for the rest of the day until the deadline was only about 20 minutes away. We did a bit of playtesting and balancing, and our friends who tried the game seemed to like it, so we were feeling pretty good. Dead Rat Dev had just gotten home from work, so we were all busy making last-minute changes and adjustments before we submitted. Now, generally what happens in game jams, pro tip, is they give you an extra hour at the end. Now, this doesn't always happen, and if you're doing a game jam, I would not count on it happening. Like, be ready to submit at the actual deadline. But that hour a lot of time can be really awesome, especially if you need to fix some last-minute bugs or if you're having problems with something. So yeah, we were standing by, and we had everything ready to submit by the deadline, but at the last minute, they extended the deadline by an hour, which was really cool. We ended up adding a couple extra things, like grass. We also fixed some bugs and added some extra sound effects and stuff too, so that was cool. A few minutes later, the real deadline was about 15 minutes away, and Muffin and Dead Rat were both finishing some things up. I was basically sitting there trying to rush them so we'd actually have time to submit. They finished in time though, and I exported everything and uploaded it to the itch page. Everything was looking good. We were all chilling, waiting for the deadline to pass. It was only when there was about 5 minutes left until the deadline that I realized we never actually submitted the game to the game jam. So yeah, we pretty much all freaked out, and Dead Out was over here scrambling, trying to submit the page as fast as he could. It was asking us all these questions like, describe your game, and how does your game relate to the theme? And we literally had like 2 minutes left, and there was this box we were supposed to credit everyone. And this guy was over here just trying to type out all our names perfectly, and he keeps misspelling them and going back and deleting them and type it again, and I'm like, dude, please just click submit, oh my god. So we ended up submitting the game 1 minute and 13 seconds before the deadline, so yeah, that happened. Well, overall, development on the game went pretty well. It was a lot more chill, at least for me, than the other game jams I've been a part of. Probably mostly because I had Muffin's help with the coding. He focused mainly on NPCs and AI, while I focused on the items and menus and some other things. In the end, I think this worked out really well, and it made it a lot less stressful for both of us. The same cannot be said for Dead Rat Dev, though, who made all the sprites and assets for the game. He was our only artist, and he had to work 3 out of the 7 remaining days, which means he only had 4 days to make all the art. So yeah, this guy was pretty much locked the hell in the whole time, I guess. I was pretty skeptical at first that he would actually be able to do it all in time, but somehow he did, so that was pretty cool. So our game is submitted, and the reception seems pretty positive. A lot of people have been leaving comments about how much they like the game, and everyone who I've watched play it seems to have enjoyed it a lot, so I'm pretty happy with that. Obviously, I hope it does well in the ratings, and I hope Donkey ends up playing it, because that would be cool, but who knows. In the meantime, you should for real check out the game. It would be really cool. It's playable on web, so you don't have to download it, and it only takes like 5 minutes, so I think you'll like it. So yeah, link in the description. Well, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, I make other stuff on this channel sometimes, so maybe check that out if you want to. Anyway, that's it. Bye.